What is the best shooter game out there right now? This question came from my friend, or editor, Aves. He's an indie gamer, but hasn't really played many shooter games in the last few years.
I'm so bad. I'm so bad.
Since I've spent over 16,000 hours streaming mainly shooters and have hit the highest rank in multiple games, he came to me to get a recommendation. But honestly, I don't know what the best shooter game is out there right now. So I set out to find the best shooter game out right now. The criteria is that it has to be free, any shooter game, not just FPS games, and is rewarding to get into. I went through the top 100 games on Steam and Twitch, picked out all the shooter games to make the ultimate tier list. The goal is to find a game to place at the top of the list in the S tier spot. Here we go, starting with Valorant.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Didn't we just make a video on why everyone hates Valorant?
Yes, we did just make a video on why everyone hates Valorant, but I do think the game has a lot of really good things, despite Valorant not being in the greatest state of all time. As someone that hasn't played the game and been abused by it for the last 5 years, it's a pretty fun game. The shooting mechanics are very rewarding, and all the different agents, yeah, that can be overwhelming at times for sure, but it also is really fun to learn the different interactions. In comparison to some of the other shooter games we're going to go over in this video, this is probably one of the easier shooter games to pick up in general. The main reason being is that there's common ground between every agent. The guns. The core mechanic across Valorant is the gunplay. And that being the first thing you learn is then applied to every single agent in the game. To me, this brings the barrier for entry in a game like Valorant way down and makes that a lot more fun to learn all the complex things about it. On top of that, when you start getting ranked, actually climbing through the ranks for the first time is really rewarding, despite there being no real rewards. The only problem is there's not really a ton of modes for just casual gameplay. Obviously, there is swift play and unrated, but they're just basically mini versions of ranked. There's not a lot of variety that comes with it, which I think could be a really fun way for some people to get into different games. So Valorant overall, in its current state right now, if we're putting it on the tier list, I would have to give it a B tier. Before we continue, let's talk about this tier list and the criteria that's going into each category. I'm ranking all these games on if you were to pick them up in its current state, and trying to keep the nostalgia of some of the games where they were in really good states out of it and only focusing on where they're currently at. Now for the actual ranks. S tier, I have incredibly high criteria. If anything goes into this category, it means you are missing out if you are not playing it. Games that would have fallen in here would have been like 2016 Overwatch, or Fortnite right when it came out, the first few episodes of Valorant. All these games I would have considered at that time, you were missing out if you weren't playing it. And who knows, maybe we'll find a game that's S tier right now. For the rest of the list, how I'm judging each game is based on how much enjoyment you get versus how much you have to put into the game to get that enjoyment. So if a game is harder to get into, the amount of enjoyment you get out of it needs to be at minimum proportional to the amount of effort you put into that game. So basically, the higher the barrier for entry, the harder the game is to learn, the more fun you need to get out of it at the end of the day. Otherwise, why not just pick up a game that's easier to learn and easier to have that fun and get that dopamine quicker? With that, let's jump into Valorant's predecessor, Counter-Strike. As someone who has a lot of experience in shooter games, but not too much in Counter-Strike, personally, I find Counter-Strike just a little clunky is kind of the word. When you pick up Valorant for the first time, everything feels smooth. The gunplay feels smooth. The movement feels smooth. And when I go to Counter-Strike, it feels like my character is floating and my bullets aren't shooting straight. I know a ton of people are probably going to say, all right, Keeoh, skill diff, get better at CS. You're totally right. But if you're going from the lens of someone who's trying to get into FPS games for the first time, this game would be a pretty hard game to pick up. However, with it being a harder game to pick up, it does have a way more variety in the ways that you can play the game. It has your classic 5v5 search and destroy, but then it also has a bunch of extra modes, like Wingman, which is genuinely one of my favorite game modes of all time, where you can just grab a buddy and 2v2 another duo. That's awesome. I don't know why more games aren't investing into game modes like this, because then the only people responsible for your outcome are you and your buddy. That's awesome. On top of that, CS has a ton of custom maps, so the further you dive into it, there's really just a lot more to do in comparison to a game like Valorant. However, from a base level, I do think that Valorant is a little more fun and easier to get into. The one thing that CS does have over Valorant that I absolutely love is gambling. I love gambling. Yeah, that's about as expected. Nothing. Well, I have still never unboxed a knife, and maybe I have spent a few $1,000s on cases. I absolutely love the dopamine rush of gambling. Am I an addict? Yes. Is Counter-Strike feeding that? Also, yes. Do I wish Valorant also had this? Yes. Please give us gambling. Everyone loves gambling. Anyway, CS is going into B tier, below Valorant, but it's still a good game. But it kind of takes a certain type of person. You have to already want to play like a tactical FPS game to get into Counter-Strike over Valorant, I would say. Anyways, moving on to the next game, Apex Legends, which also has gambling. Oh, I got it!
Wait,
I got one of them. I got a red. I got the mythic! Apex Legends is a battle royale FPS game where squads of 3 pick different legends and drop into a map where you fight other squads until one squad is left. I didn't play it a lot when it came out originally because there are a lot of things that kind of just felt wrong in the game to me, where I would run out of ammo, wouldn't find the guns I want, wouldn't ever have enough shield, that's for sure. But picking up the game kind of recently, all of those problems are completely mitigated. I can pretty much always find the gun I want. I can pretty much always have enough ammo. And shield is not really a problem, especially if you're shooting well, because every shield now evolves instead of trying to get lucky and find purple armor on the floor. Personally, picking up this game and learning it over the last 6 months has been one of the most fun gaming experiences I've had in the last few years. The movement in this game is absolutely beautiful. The skill ceiling is super high with some crazy tech that's involved, but also that tech is completely unnecessary if you're just picking up the game, which is the perfect middle ground for having a game that has a high skill ceiling but a low barrier for entry. The more you play it, the more you learn, the more enjoyment you get out of the game. And that is, in a sense, one of the most perfect things about this game. On top of that, similarly to Valorant, the core mechanic of the game is the gunplay. And that's a consistent factor across every single legend you play. So while abilities are important and learning how to play a legend properly does help a lot, the core gameplay is the gunplay. And as soon as you kind of learn that, plus a little bit of movement, the game is just exponentially more fun from there. Now, I don't want to sit over here and glaze Apex too hard because this game has also caused me to crash out a ridiculous amount recently. Another squad! Normally in a battle royale game, there's a giant ship that carries all the players and you drop across the map wherever you want to drop. This allows different play styles. You can kind of rat, you can scrap for loot, or you could drop in the more central locations. And if you do that, you're probably going to fight a lot of teams. Now, Apex in its most recent season updated to completely get rid of the dropship and opt in for drop zones, equally distributing the players across the map. This to me is one of the worst changes because it completely changes the options in how you could play the game. And that's one of the best parts about a battle royale game, in my opinion, especially if you're like learning the game and trying to figure out how to loot. Getting thrown into the center of the map is a little daunting, even with it being an equal distribution of players. So I think that change, while it is more competitive, really is a deterring factor for me. Now, this change isn't in the casual modes, so if you are picking up the game, you can still drop from the dropship, which is great. But for me, I get the most dopamine from playing ranked, and whenever I pick up a new game, that's the first thing I try to unlock. If I were to rank this game 6 months ago, I would have put Apex in S tier. I'm actually still a little upset that I didn't play this game more when I was really enjoying it. But even though I have some gripes with the game, I wouldn't put it all the way down in B tier or anything, because this game also has a ton of different modes. I normally don't play too many of these, but hopping into this limited time mode in Apex was one of the most fun things I've done recently, and I'm definitely gonna go back and play more. Hitting someone with a bat and sending them flying across the map is hilarious. And that's exactly what a casual game mode should be doing, just wacky things that are incredibly fun. Like, there's no reason for this game mode to be uber competitive or anything like that. This is just hilarious. So anyway, ranking Apex in its current state, I would have to put it in A tier. Getting into the game is a little hard for sure. Learning how to loot and understand how all the guns work does take a little bit of time, but once you actually put that time in, the game just consistently becomes more fun over time. Next up in our list, we have Marvel Rivals. Marvel Rivals is a 6v6 hero-based arena shooter. You work as a team against another team to either push or defend an objective, capture points, and the team that gets the most points wins. Despite this game being incredibly overwhelming at times, it does have a lot going for it. I mean, first off, it's Marvel. You can play as Spider-Man, Black Panther, Thor, all of the most iconic people in the MCU. If you're an MCU fan, this is a fun game to play, and they really hit the nail on the head of making you feel like the characters that you're playing as. However, if you've never played a shooter game before, this game is going to be very overwhelming. There are so many things happening on your screen at all times and all of them mean something. And the more time you put in, the more you figure it out. But for a while, it's just absolute chaos while you're learning. This game is a more casual game in general, which is good because it's kind of welcoming to new players, but also bad because it's welcoming to new players. And there's a lot of people that have no idea what's going on, even if you're playing ranked and climbing up in the ranks. It's really fun to find a playstyle that suits you in Marvel Rivals, whether it's playing as healer or damage or tank, and then finding your niche within that niche is really cool to understand, hey, this is like really how I like to play the game. But I will say the more time you invest in this game, the less return you get. It really seems like that to me. The more time I've put into the game, I've slowly just started to enjoy it less, versus a game like Apex, where the more time you put into it, it just starts to get more fun. And so the barrier for entry in this game is low, and you can start to enjoy it relatively fast. But the more you start to enjoy it, the more you also kind of start to hate it, especially if you're putting time into grinding ranked. Holy cow. If you want to just rank up in this game, all you have to do is put time in and the game will rank you up. And as a result of that, there are a lot of players that have made it to somewhat higher ranks and have no idea how to play the game, which is very frustrating at times, because there are some games where you play incredibly well and you just lose because of your luck of the draw with bad teammates. That's a problem in almost every game, but it's really prominent in Marvel Rivals. Overall though, with its low barrier for entry and how fast you start to enjoy the game, I would have to put it in B tier, especially if you're picking it up as one of your first shooter games. This is honestly a great game to get into, and if you have a favorite superhero or villain that's in the game, you could play as them, and that's a great way to start playing shooter games if you want to get into them. I probably wouldn't recommend this game to Aves because he's one of 6 people in the world that doesn't like the MCU. Next up, we have a very similar game to Marvel Rivals, Overwatch 2. This game is also a hero-based arena shooter, except it's mechanically more challenging, and it doesn't have the Marvel IP to carry it. Overwatch is basically Marvel Rivals, but on hard mode. If you've never played a shooter game before, and you pick Overwatch as your first shooter game, it's like picking heroin as your first drug. You're going straight to the big leagues with no warm-up. However, if this is your type of game, you like hero-based arena shooters, Overwatch is phenomenal. While every game struggles with imbalanced teams here and there, if you are having a really good game, you can be the reason that your team wins in Overwatch. And that's just not the case in a lot of other games. So the barrier for entry in this game is significantly higher than other games, but the more you invest in it, the more that you actually get out of it, I would say. On top of that, this game has a lot of different modes. There's 5v5 Overwatch with role queue, there's 6v6, there's stadium mode, which is just even more chaotic. But if you get into Overwatch in general, there's just a lot more to do, and there are a ton of custom game modes. So if you get into Overwatch and end up enjoying it, there is a lot more to do, but it does take some time to kind of get over that first initial hurdle. I started playing Overwatch back in 2016, and as someone who sunk a few thousand hours into Overwatch 1, this game is past its prime, that's for sure. All things considered, this game is almost 10 years old, and there's still a ton to do in it. Is kind of impressive. So personally, for the rankings, I would put Overwatch 2 above Marvel Rivals, but still B tier. The barrier for entry is a little higher, but the reward for actually putting that time in is also, I would say, a big step up from Marvel Rivals. Next up, we have another game I've sunk a few thousand hours into, Fortnite. This game originally gained popularity as a battle royale, but has since kind of turned into the, I honestly can't even explain. There are tons of game modes. You can play as a Lego. You can do Rock Band. Tons of different custom game modes. Tons of different official game modes. It's kind of hard to tell where to start. First off, we'll start with just the official modes in Fortnite. The barrier for entry in this game is nothing. As long as you have a computer or a console that can run this game, you can get into it. Most of the more casual players tend to lead towards the no building mode, which is totally fair. That makes sense because building is a complex mechanic that takes a lot of time to get down and master. To me, playing Fortnite without playing builds, it seems pointless because that's like, in my mind, the whole purpose of the game. But I totally get that the whole building thing is very daunting for any new player. So it's kind of cool that there are no build modes where if you were to actually get into Fortnite, you wanted to try it out for a while, you could play no build modes or even some of the other custom modes that don't require additional mechanics to learn how to play the base level of the game. Imagine you could learn Apex Legends or Valorant with no abilities. You just got to learn the gunplay. That's basically what Fortnite has done. Actually getting good at this game, learning how to build, and then outplaying somebody is probably one of the most satisfying feelings you could ever feel in a game. However, you have to put a lot of time in to actually get to that level. If you have never played a shooter game before, I would honestly highly recommend playing Fortnite because you're going to learn a lot of very basic mechanics that is applicable to every shooter across the board. However, if you have a background in shooters, the more you put into Fortnite, it kind of becomes a little just purposeless. For example, if you were to get a win back when the game came out, it was like really impressive. Everyone was putting it on their Instagram stories and stuff, which was cool. But now the game is kind of overrun with bots in the game. And there are so many different game modes that getting a win is just like not really as impressive. So while that is still rewarding, if you haven't done that before, it feels really good. That feeling kind of quickly fades and the game doesn't really have too much purpose besides the pure love of the game for outplaying other people. The rank system's kind of a joke and it's a little overwhelming to just even pick a game mode in general. The player base across the game is divided between like 20 different game modes, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that just means it's not really a shooter anymore. It's more just Roblox. Doesn't mean this game isn't fun. It's really fun to play and hop on with friends, but as someone who's put a bunch of time into the game, I don't ever feel really inclined to hop on and grind Fortnite anymore. I kind of just hop on socially to play with some friends, and that's about it. So for the ranking of this game, I think I have to add it to the growing list of B tier games. I would probably put it below Valorant, but above Counter-Strike. But definitely, if you've never played a shooter game before, this would go into S tier. You should play it because this is probably going to teach you a lot about shooter games in general. And then from there, you can play whatever you want. Now let's move on to the next game, Rainbow Six Siege. Or is it Siege X now? I don't know. Now, I'm trying to be as impartial in my judgment here, but obviously this is going to be a subjective list and tier list. This game, to me, is awful. I'm sorry. I have to say it, starting this out. So Siege is similar to Valorant and Counter-Strike, that it's a tactical first-person shooter, but I honestly wouldn't even put it in the same category as a tactical FPS because it's so much more tactical than the other shooters. It's not really about the shooting as much. It's more about the tactical part. There are a ton of different operators to choose from, which honestly makes the game very overwhelming. And the time to kill in this game is the shortest time to kill I've ever seen for a tactical FPS. If you shoot anyone in the head in this mode, they will die. It does not matter where the bullet came from. If it got shot through 6 walls, if you hit them in the head, they will die, which is a crazy thing. And I was talking about this the other day. Somebody was trying to learn Valorant and had a background in Siege and was having a hard time learning Valorant, which makes sense because if this is your baseline, I genuinely feel sorry for you because this is a crazy level of tactical gameplay in comparison to what I consider the more fun part of the shooter game, the shooting, which makes sense. So I don't want to come off as just totally like crapping on this game that I haven't put a lot of time into, but I got in a call with one of my buddies who has put a few thousand hours into this game and he totally understood my perspective. He did say that the game is really fun once you learn a lot more about the game, but to me, that learning process should be really fun. So if you're into really tactical games and get really serious about strategy and how to play around your utility, then this game might be for you. Personally, I like the shooting aspect of the shooter game, and that's just not really the main purpose in Siege. So I know it can be fun, but to me, the barrier for entry is just a little too high that I definitely would not recommend this to anyone just hopping into shooter games. With that said, a high skill ceiling isn't necessarily a bad thing. The more time you put into it, the more reward you actually get out of it. You start to understand your utility more, you start to understand exactly what to do, and you have the ability to pull off really cool plays. It just might take you a while to get there. So for ranking this game, I'm gonna have to put it into the C tier. It's just a little too overwhelming, and from my understanding, it just doesn't seem like the reward is really worth it to put in a few hundred hours to get really good at it. So on to our next game, Call of Duty. Specifically, the only free version of the game, Warzone. Call of Duty's Battle Royale. I played a lot of Call of Duty growing up on the Xbox 360, and it was a ton of fun, a really big part of my childhood. But ever since I swapped over to playing PC games with a keyboard and mouse, Call of Duty has always kind of felt a little clunky to me. In the same way that PC games kind of feel sometimes ported over to console, Call of Duty seems like a console game kind of ported over to PC, if that makes sense. Now, the barrier for entry isn't too high for this game, except you need like 200 gigabytes on your hard drive in order to install it. But one of the greatest things about Battle Royale games that I really enjoy is the fact that you can just choose your own playstyle. If you're new to the game and you want to land in a place that nobody else is going to land across the map, that's awesome. And you could just learn the basics of movement and looting and understanding what your guns do. That's a great way to learn. However, that also means you're going to spend the majority of your gameplay looting, and then you're probably going to get smoked by someone who's played a lot longer than you and then has their loadout already dialed in. With that being the case for the main Warzone mode, I had a lot more fun in the Resurgence mode, where you respawn multiple times as long as your teammate is still alive. Overall, the gameplay is super polished, the gunplay feels good, getting kills is rewarding, but with the amount of other shooter games I've played, it just feels like this game kind of lacks depth that a lot of other shooter games has. And I get that not everyone playing wants that depth of gameplay. Sometimes you just want to hop on a game and not really think and just shoot some stuff with the boys. Totally nothing wrong with that. But if you're trying to pick a game that you really want to grind, I wouldn't put this game super high up on my list. Before I rank this game, I want to run it by Aves, because this is one of the few shooter games he's actually played. So Aves, how do you feel if I were to rank Warzone in C tier?
Honestly, I think you're being a little generous. I hate Warzone. I like Call of Duty, like multiplayer, but you have to pay for that, and Warzone is just not fun.
Fair enough. I feel a lot better about it going to C tier then. All right. Moving on to our next game, Delta Force. This game has a few different game modes with big team battles and extraction shooters. It really surprised me. In the big team battle mode, the gunplay felt very similar to Call of Duty, except you have a little bit more depth with agents and abilities. So again, I was really surprised that this was a free game, because generally this market is kind of dominated by $60 games that release the same thing every few years. I had honestly never heard of this game before, but it peaks at over 200,000 players a day on Steam, which is kind of nuts. The big team battle mode has that similar vibe where you just want to play a game with your friends, and it's basically kind of mindless. You're just running around shooting stuff. Not a ton of depth to the game there. You're not really playing like, oh wow, I'm trying to make it so my team wins. You're kind of just trying to make cool plays, and I don't know, shoot some stuff. It's fun. But then if you get out of that game mode, you have a whole different game to play where you can launch into an extraction shooter, which is kind of nuts. These types of games, you basically load into a map, kind of similar to a battle royale, but your goal is to loot things around the map, kill other players, kill some things in the environment. And unlike a battle royale, it's not the last player standing. Your goal is to extract successfully, and you keep your loot. Now, extraction shooters have crazy amounts of depth, and they are really fun to play, but having the base mechanics that you learn in a bigger team battle type of game is really cool, so that you can get a lot of experience in learning how to shoot and play around your abilities really well, but then you can take that and kind of raise the stakes on those fights a little bit more and try to extract with expensive loot. Now, I think there are probably better extraction shooters out there, but the thing is, this game is free entirely, so that just really blew me away. I'm very impressed with Delta Force. Now, personally, I didn't play it too much, so I can't really speak to how rewarding it is if you were to grind the game consistently. But at a baseline, I would put this way above Call of Duty if you were to try to pick up a game and you wanted a little bit more depth. So I'm going to put Delta Force in B tier. Let's move on to our next game, Deadlock. Now, this game isn't technically fully out yet, but it is free and it's playable, so it's going on the list. Deadlock is a MOBA shooter. It's kind of similar to League of Legends, but instead of it being top down, it's a shooter. This game has one of, if not the highest barrier for entry of any shooter game I've ever played, I think. The amount of things happening on your screen, different heroes there are in the game, different abilities you can have, different abilities you can purchase, ways that you can buff your character. It's incredibly overwhelming, even as someone who has a lot of time in different shooter games. To be fair, I haven't really played many MOBAs. Everyone that really likes Deadlock really likes Deadlock. But to me, kind of from the outside looking in, one of the biggest factors that's really deterring from me getting into it is that when I see somebody pull off a really cool play, I have no idea what just happened. Even after putting some time into this game, I'm still really confused whenever something cool happens. Now, with me trying to stay as objective as possible in this, completely honest, this game is just not for me. I don't really enjoy MOBAs too much, but the people that really get into it are absolutely loving the game. But it just seems like an absolute headache to try to learn what's actually happening. With that said, it does have an incredibly high skill ceiling. There are tons of different ways you can play the game. You could focus on building certain abilities out or creating a build that's specific to your playstyle. But the amount of work that you have to put in order to pull that off, it just feels kind of like school to me. I just want to play the game. Now, again, I'm not speaking from experience because I haven't put a few hundred hours in this game to really understand it well yet, But I feel like you could get almost the same amount of dopamine from pulling off a really cool play in Overwatch, and you'd have to put in like 10 times less amount of effort in order to make that happen. So for me personally, Deadlock's barrier for entry is really what's keeping me away from the game. It's very confusing, it's hard to watch, and unless you really understand a lot of it, or you just really want to learn a lot of it, it's gonna be incredibly difficult to get into. So you kind of have to be a little more committed to eventually have the payoff that makes this game really fun. Now, obviously, anytime you load up a game with friends, it's going to be more fun. But if that's your argument for why Deadlock is fun, is that it's fun to play with friends, then you don't like Deadlock, you just like playing with your friends. And if every game is fun when you play it with friends. So to rank this game, Deadlock is jumping in C tier. I'd put it below Call of Duty, but above Rainbow Six Siege, mainly because the gunplay is still really satisfying to play and shoot, which just isn't really a factor in Siege to me. Now, before we get to the final 3 games in this list, and the game that might potentially be S tier, we gotta have some honorable mentions because there are a lot of games that didn't make the cut for this list. First off, Rust is an incredibly cool shooter game, but it's paid. Barrier for entry is pretty high, but it seems like a lot of fun if you actually get into it. Fragpunk is incredibly fun. It's overwhelming, it's chaotic, it's wacky, it doesn't take itself too seriously, but its player count is pretty low. World of Tanks and War Thunder have shockingly high player counts. They both were in the top 100 games on Steam. And while they're technically shooters, I didn't really feel like they belong in this category. But hey, if you like tanks, check it out. Arena Breakout Infinite is coming soon, and that seems pretty hype. Halo Infinite is still puttering around, but its player count is also pretty low. Off the Grid is actually fantastic. I got sponsored to play this game a while back, and it was shockingly really fun, but it could be optimized a bit more, and on top of that, its player count is also pretty low, so the people that are playing it are really dedicated and you will be wiped. Farlight 84 also seems pretty fun. Seems like kind of an easier Apex Legends, but also is a pretty small game. And finally, for the honorable mentions, Battlefield 6 is coming out pretty soon, and that seems pretty hype, but it is also a paid game. Now, for our final 3 games, one of the top games dominating the Steam charts constantly, PUBG. I have no idea how that's true. That's the case. This game consistently peaks in the top 3 most played games on Steam, which is insane to me because this game is terrible. It's just bad. I know it's very large on mobile and in Asia, but in general, this game is just so, like, terrible. It's like laughable to me. If you haven't played it before, PUBG is a battle royale game, and everything about it while playing it just screams, I am a mobile game, and it's really clunky. It's well past its prime. It did have its time in the spotlight when the whole battle royale genre was taking off, but the game just feels like somehow worse than it did back then. I don't know what happened. It's somehow incredibly simple and incredibly overly complicated. And I will say, I did have some fun running it down and getting a chicken dinner with my buddy Elite, but it was fun because we were laughing at how terrible the mechanics were. I will not be relaunching this game anytime soon, and I'm still baffled that this is one of the top games on Steam. F tier. On to the next, a nostalgic classic that I have not launched since 2015. Team Fortress 2. Now, before I give this absolute historic and nostalgic game a rating, I need to remind everyone on the criteria system. The criteria is if you were to pick this game up today, you were to hop in and say, hey, come play this game with me. It's sick. If you're telling someone to hop on TF2 as their first shooter, you are insane. This game is so funny to play, but it's so bad. There's like no hit registration, so when you shoot somebody, there's 0 feedback that lets you know you hit them. All you have to look at the kill feed and see that you killed them in order to see that you actually got the kill. There's a bunch of wacky things in the game. It is fun. It's fun to hop on and just like mess around, but it is just overall very silly, and it almost like doesn't teach you anything that's super transferable to other shooter games, which is like kind of a baseline for all the other games. With that said, I remember having a lot of fun playing this game back in the day before all these other amazing shooter games came out. But now comparing TF2 to some of the more modern shooter games, it's just a little silly, because if you were to release a game like this today, it would just absolutely flop. Despite its absolutely legendary historic reputation in the gaming community with shooter games, I have to sadly put Team Fortress 2 in F tier as well. All right, and the final game of the FPS tier list, we've been building it up, the finals. This game is in a completely different genre of its own. It's kind of like a battle royale, but instead of having like 100 players, you're against 4 teams. And in order to move on to the next round, you need to be in the top 2 teams. And if you make it all the way to the finals, you 1v1 against the other top team. There are 3 different classes: light, medium, and heavy. And unlike other games that are hero shooters, this is what they call a hero builder, really, is what the devs said. Which makes sense, because while there are common themes behind each class, you can really play light, medium, or heavy whatever way you want. And that's honestly one of the coolest things about the game. The finals really surprised me. I ended up putting in a bunch of hours recently into this game, and the more I learned how to play it, the more fun I was having. I will say the barrier for entry is slightly high because it is a little chaotic at times, but it's nowhere near the level of chaos that happens in like Marvel Rivals, for example. It takes a minimal amount of analysis to figure out what exactly happened, and you kind of just need to start thinking about those things in the future. The best part about this game is just the fact that you can play it genuinely however you want. If you want to run around with swords, you can. If you want to snipe from a far distance, you can also do that. Whatever your playstyle is possible in the finals. The skill ceiling is infinite. There are so many builds that we haven't even figured out in this game that are sitting there waiting to be discovered. The skins in this game are hilarious. And that's what I think so many video games are missing. Like, the game itself just kind of seems like it doesn't take itself seriously. I'm literally wearing a frog onesie and Elite is shooting people with a stick. This is awesome. I feel like it just encapsulates the right vibe of what I want most video games to be, where it's like, yeah, we want to try, we want to have fun, and we want to be competitive, but also like, let's do some wacky stuff and just make it a little silly, because at the end of the day, it's a video game. We're supposed to have fun. I definitely want to play more of the finals, and for my ranking, I would put it up in S tier right now, but it just doesn't have that factor that I feel like you're missing out if you're not playing it right now. Maybe that's just due to the player base not being super huge. It just doesn't have that global sensation feeling yet, but I think it could be due for a resurgence. So I'm putting the finals in A tier. It's incredibly fun, and I highly recommend you check it out. All right, Aves, I've tested and tier listed all the games. Tell me what you think.
Dude, there's not even a single S tier on this list. What do you even want me to play? You know what? Just forget it. I'm just going back to Silksong.